Chapter 1. The Summoning Disaster. Kaito Minami did not consider himself a man of high ambitions. He didn't want glory, he didn't want power, he didn't even want money. All he wanted was a nap. Unfortunately, the modern-day Tokyo salaryman's life was a long-running horror show of endless overtime, office politics, and a boss who believed rest was a mythical concept invented by lazy people. One rainy evening, halfway through microwaving a sad convenience store meal, Kaito leaned against the counter and muttered to no one in particular. God, Buddha, dragon, alien, I don't care who. Just take me away from this hell for a while. The universe, as it turned out, had a sense of humor. Because 2 minutes later, he slipped on the wet floor, hit his head, and the next thing he knew. Meanwhile, in the kingdom of Dravenheart, inside the grand ceremonial hall of obsidian and gold, the entire royal court stood in tense anticipation. At the center was King Aldrich Dravenheart, the Dragon King, the Warbringer, conqueror of 9 kingdoms, about to perform the ancient summoning ritual to call forth his fated consort. This mate, foretold by prophecy, was said to be the only one who could quell his dragon's endless thirst for battle. A bright circle of magic lit the floor. Incantations rang out. A figure began to form within the light, and with a loud plop, a man in a wrinkled black suit landed face first on the marble. The hall went silent. Kaito groaned, lifted his head, and squinted up at the crowd of armored strangers. Is this Shinjuku Station? No, wait, where the hell am I? Aldrich stepped forward, his boots echoing against the marble. Tall, broad-shouldered, long silver hair cascading over black and gold armor. He looked like a god of war. His golden eyes, slit like a dragon's, locked on the confused man before him. Luna, Aldrich said in a voice deep enough to rattle bones, my destined mate. Kaito blinked slowly, still half in shock. Nope, wrong guy, send me back. The first act of manipulation. Before Kaito could take a step back, the glowing summoning slab cracked loudly with a thunderous boom. Golden sparks flew everywhere. In truth, it was just Zephyr, the king's advisor, secretly setting off fireworks spells. But to Kaito, it looked like the magic had literally self-destructed. Gasps filled the court. It's fate, someone whispered. There's no going back, another murmured. Kaito didn't buy it completely, but the way Aldrich's usually cold face softened ever so slightly made his stomach twist with unexpected guilt. The early months, reluctance meets persistence. The first weeks were rough. Kaito complained daily, refusing royal meals, insisting he didn't want fancy robes, and trying, unsuccessfully, to sneak out of the palace. But Aldrich never once lost patience. In fact, he adjusted his approach. When Kaito refused to eat, Aldrich just happened to sit beside him at meals, patiently peeling fruit and offering it with an unreadable expression until Kaito rolled his eyes and accepted a slice. When Kaito tried to hide in the gardens, Aldrich would quietly work at a nearby bench, never speaking, until Kaito, annoyed by the silence, ended up starting the conversation. He never forced closeness, never raised his voice, yet Kaito began finding him less intolerable each day. Domestic moments. The soft spot grows. By the 4th month, things had shifted. One evening, Kaito found Aldrich dozing in his chair, hair falling over his face, a stack of paperwork beside him. Kaito muttered something about workaholic idiots and tossed a blanket over him. He told himself it was just basic human decency. He ignored the small smile that tugged at Aldrich's lips in his sleep. By the 6th month, Kaito had discovered Aldrich's strange habit of leaving small gifts in places only Kaito would find. A book in his language, rare sweets from the market, a pillow so soft Kaito actually fell asleep mid-sentence. By the 8th month, Kaito caught himself laughing, actually laughing, when Aldrich made a rare dry joke during dinner. The sound startled them both. Don't look so proud, Kaito muttered, stabbing his food. I'm not proud, Aldrich replied smoothly. I'm pleased. The secret behind the broken slab. Kaito still hadn't given up on returning home. Every so often he'd bring it up, So one day, they all gathered around the slab again, and Aldrich began to do a ritual when Kaido's body began to glow faintly, but suddenly Aldrich's energy began to diminish rapidly and he fell to the ground. When asked by Kaito what happened and if he can still go back to his own world, Zephyr or Seraphina give him a sorrowful look and remind him the slab was beyond repair, and that Aldrich's health had suffered greatly from the soul-transferring ritual. Of course, Aldrich played the part of the stoic but weakened king perfectly, never enough to seem fragile, but just enough to make Kaido hesitate to tell him to do the ritual again for sending him back home. He hid his obsession well, showing Kaido only the patience of a devoted partner, never the hunger of a dragon who had already decided Luna was never leaving. By the time winter fell over Dravenheart, the kingdom had changed. The wars had ceased. The people adored the mysterious consort who could quiet the king's restless spirit. And though Kaido still muttered, "I'll find a way back," under his breath, he didn't notice that somehow this strange, dangerous place had already started to feel a little like home. Chapter 2. The Great Guilt Trap. 8 months. 8 long, stubborn, exhausting months. Aldrich Dravenheart, the fearsome dragon king who once brought empires to their knees, had discovered that conquering a kingdom was far easier than conquering one particular overworked salaryman. Because Kaito Minami, despite laughing at Aldrich's jokes now, despite letting the king braid his hair once, he claimed he was too tired to stop him. Despite the occasional soft smile, still refused to stay. No matter the banquets, no matter the peace he had brought to the land, no matter the affection slowly blooming between them, Kaido still muttered at least once a week, "I'm going back home." It was starting to grate on everyone's nerves. The court conspiracy. Zephyr Valen, royal advisor and master strategist, was the first to voice the idea out loud. "We need to make him think leaving is impossible," he said one evening, lounging in Aldrich's study with a glass of wine. Seraphina, commander of the Sky Guard and the king's fiercely loyal cousin, leaned on her spear. "If Luna leaves, we lose our king. You'll go back to waging wars and sulking in your throne room. We like this peaceful, slightly annoying version of you." Aldrich didn't bother denying it. "He's my mate. He belongs here. I will not let him go." They all knew the truth. The teleportation slab wasn't destroyed. It was perfectly intact, hidden away in a locked vault. And there was indeed a ritual that could send Kaito home. But no one in that room wanted him to use it. So Zephyr smirked, swirling his wine. "Then, Your Majesty, it's time we use the greatest weapon in the realm." Aldrich arched a brow. "Which is?" Zephyr's grin widened. "Guilt. The elaborate act." The next morning, Kaito was summoned to the grand ceremonial hall. There, Aldrich stood in his royal robes, flanked by mages, his golden eyes solemn. "I found a way," he announced, "a ritual, to send you back." Kaito's heart jolted. "Really?" Aldrich nodded slowly, glancing toward the supposedly beyond repair slab, now repaired enough to glow faintly under a layer of cracked illusions, and then at Kaito with extremely sorrowful eyes. "But it will drain my energy severely like the last time. But I will still try to send you back to your world." The ritual began, golden light swirling around Aldrich's form. Slowly, deliberately, he staggered, his steps faltering and blood coming out of his mouth. Kaito's brows furrowed and panicked looking at him. "Hey, you okay?" Aldrich waved him off, but his voice grew faint. "It's nothing. Just the cost of sending you back." By the end of the ritual, Aldrich collapsed into Zephyr's arms, coughing blood. The bedridden king again. For the next week, Aldrich refused to leave his bed. He allowed healers to fuss over him, but never took any medicine unless Kaito personally gave it to him. When Kaito tried to hand him a spoonful of soup, Aldrich looked at him with weak, feverish eyes. "I can only eat if you feed me." Kaito groaned. "You're a grown man, not a baby bird." Aldrich's lips curved faintly. "A grown man who's dying for you." "You're insufferable," Kaito muttered, but still fed him. But Kaito was internally blaming himself for Alaric's condition, and that too for a second time. Public pressure. If the manipulation inside the palace wasn't enough, the villagers joined in. Whenever Kaido visited the market, shopkeepers bowed and called him Luna, thanking him for bringing peace and changing their king. A baker handed him a fresh pastry and said, "If you leave, the king will be lost again. Please, stay." Kaido grumbled under his breath but felt that uncomfortable squeeze in his chest again. Why they helped. One evening, Kaido walked past the war council room and overheard Seraphina and Zephyr. "You know why we want Luna with our king, right?" Seraphina was saying. Before him, Aldrich was different, ruthless, always restless, but with Luna, the wars ended. Our people smile again. Even Aldrich smiles. Luna is really a blessing for all of us from TGE Moon. Zephyr's voice was quieter, but deadly serious. If Luna leaves, the peace dies with him. I'll lie, I'll scheme, I'll burn, I'll do anything before I let that happen. Kaido froze in the shadows, throat tight. The final push. That night, he sat at Aldrich's bedside. The king's breathing was slow, his golden eyes half-lidded as he whispered, "If you leave, my kingdom will burn again." Kaido looked away, fingers tightening on the blanket. "Fine, but I'm still not marrying you." Aldrich's lips curved faintly in the shadows. "I can wait until you accept me." And he could, because the Dragon King had all the patience in the world, as long as his Luna never left his side. Chapter 3. The Reluctant Royal Consort. Kaito Minami had exactly 3 rules in life. 1. Avoid unnecessary work. 2. Avoid unnecessary social interaction. 3. Absolutely avoid unnecessary politics. So naturally, Aldrich decided to throw him headfirst into all 3. Council torture. "Do I really have to be here?" Kaito asked for the 6th time that morning, slouched in a high-backed chair beside the Dragon King's throne. "Yes," Aldrich replied, without looking at him, flipping through a stack of scrolls. "You are my consort. I am not yet," Aldrich added smoothly, as if Kaito hadn't spoken. The council chamber was filled with stiff-faced ministers and generals, all droning on about trade routes, defense budgets, and other things Kaito had zero interest in. His eyelids were already starting to droop. That was when the ambassador from the Western Isles spoke up, his tone dripping with false courtesy. "And of course, Your Majesty, we must discuss the possibility of resuming minor border skirmishes for economic gain." Kaito snorted without thinking. "Ah yes, because nothing says economic gain, like burning people's homes and wasting tax money on pointless fights. Brilliant idea." The room went still. Several ministers looked like they were about to faint. The ambassador's eyes narrowed. "And who, may I ask, are you to speak in such a manner?" "I'm the guy sitting next to the one who can turn you into barbecue," Kaito said flatly, jerking his thumb at Aldrich. "And I think your idea is stupid." There was a long, stunned silence. Then, to everyone's surprise, the ambassador lowered his head and mumbled something about reconsidering peaceful alternatives. War averted. Accidentally. The people's favorite. Word spread quickly through the palace and the city. The Luna had shamed a foreign ambassador into keeping the peace. When Kaito walked through the market that week, vendors pressed flowers into his hands, children waved at him, and someone even carved a small wooden figurine of him and Aldrich standing side by side. He grumbled about ridiculous overreactions, but secretly kept the figurine on his bedside table. The garden gift. A few days later, Aldrich led Kaito through a side corridor of the palace and into a sunlit courtyard. "This," Aldrich said, "is yours." Kaito blinked. Before him stretched a private garden, lush greenery, a koi pond, a shaded pavilion with an enormous cushioned bench. "You made me a nap spot," Kaito said slowly. "A garden," Aldrich corrected, "with guards." Kaito's eyes narrowed. "So I can't run away." Aldrich's lips curved. "Exactly." Night confessions. That night, Kaito found himself wandering the halls, restless. He ended up in Aldrich's private chambers where the king sat by the window, the moonlight painting silver across his hair. You should be asleep, Aldrich said, without looking away from the view. So should you, Kaido countered, walking over. Thinking about conquering someone? Aldrich shook his head. No, I was thinking about how I've stopped all wars. Because of you. Because you mentioned once that you hate wars and bloodsheds. Kaido froze. That's ridiculous. It's true, Aldrich said softly. Before you came, there was always another battle, another enemy. But now, there's only you. Heat crept up Kaido's neck. You're still a manipulative, creepy lizard. Aldrich finally turned to look at him, golden eyes glinting in the dark. You're lizard. Kaido looked away quickly, muttering something about needing to sleep. But as he walked back to his room, he caught himself smiling. Kaito's thoughts. 8 months ago, all Kaido wanted was to go home. Even now, he still told himself he would, someday. But somewhere along the way, the marble halls had stopped feeling like a cage. The people's smiles didn't seem so strange anymore. The bed felt too big without a certain overprotective dragon hovering nearby. And maybe, just maybe, he was starting to fall for the man he swore he'd never love. Not that he'd admit it out loud. Chapter 4. The Binding Vows. It had been past 1 year now since he came into this world and adapted to it accordingly and still doing. But today it felt something different, like something is going on in the palace. Today, the palace was buzzing like a beehive after someone kicked it. It started with a whisper. The Luna is in danger. Rival kingdoms had allegedly sent spies to steal away the moon-blessed consort of their beloved Dragon King. By mid-morning, the whispers turned into full-blown declarations. By noon, the court was in chaos. And by late afternoon, Aldrich had decided the only reasonable course of action was to marry Kaito before sundown. Kaito naturally disagreed. No, he said firmly, arms crossed, standing in Aldrich's study. Absolutely not. This is absurd. This is necessary, Aldrich interrupted, leaning back in his chair like a predator at ease. His golden eyes glittered, not with amusement, but with a dangerous finality. You are too important, too vulnerable. I won't risk it. You won't risk it, Kaito repeated, voice climbing an octave. I'm not some delicate flower you have to pluck and lock in a vase. Yes, you are, Aldrich said without hesitation. Kaito's mouth dropped open. Did you just… You… Mine, Aldrich stated simply, rising to his feet. His presence seemed to fill the room, heat rolling off him like the breath of a dragon. And if anyone so much as breathes the thought of touching you, they will cease to exist. The simplest way to prevent that is to make you my lawful consort before the sun sets. Kaito spluttered. That's not simplest, that's insane. Convenient, Aldrich corrected. Before Kaito could mount a defense, Aldrich had already summoned the royal council, priests, and half the palace staff. Kaito's protests echoed uselessly down the marble halls as he was shepherded away by attendants who seemed far too happy to dress him in shimmering silver wedding robes. You're all traitors, Kaito hissed at the servants, swatting away a jeweled headpiece. They just smiled, cooed about how radiant he looked, and kept tightening his sash. By the time Kaito was dragged to the grand ceremonial hall, the place was overflowing with nobles, warriors, and common folk who had somehow been invited at the last minute. The crowd erupted in cheers the moment they saw him. Kaito froze, deer in torchlight, as all eyes fell on him. Aldrich stood at the altar, draped in regal black and gold, looking every inch the untouchable monarch. His gaze locked on Kaito like he'd been starved for centuries. Kaito wanted to run. His legs refused to move. The ceremony began before he could gather the courage to bolt. You are the moon to my night, the heart to my chest, Aldrich swore, voice low but carrying across the hall. I vow on my crown, my life and my flames, no harm will come to you while I still draw breath. My loyalty is yours until the end of time. Kaito's throat tightened. For a split second, the sincerity in Aldrich's voice almost made him forget how furious he was. Almost. When the priest turned to him expectantly, Kaito muttered, Yeah, sure, whatever. The priest coughed meaningfully. Kaito rolled his eyes, voice dry. I guess I'll stick around. Try not to burn down the palace while I'm here. The crowd laughed. Aldrich didn't. He looked at Kaido like he'd just been handed the world. The vows were sealed. Trumpets blared. Flower petals rained down from the balconies. Kaido didn't even have a chance to greet anyone before Aldrich swept him up bridal style, ignoring his loud protests. "Put me down, you maniac!" Kaito squirmed, trying to push at Aldrich's chest. "No," Aldrich replied calmly, already striding down the aisle with the weight of a king and the stubbornness of a dragon. "You're mine now. I'm taking you home." "Home. Our chamber." Aldrich's smirk was lethal. "Where I can make sure you never try to run away again." "I will bite you," Kaido threatened. "Good," Aldrich said without missing a beat. "Maybe I'll bite back." The crowd roared with approval. And somewhere deep inside, despite himself, Kaido's heart was racing, not entirely out of anger. Chapter 5. The Happily Manipulated Ever After. The wedding night was explosive. Kaido had every intention of keeping the obsessive Dragon King at arm's length, but Aldrich had a talent for melting his defenses and his common sense with equal skill. What began as Kaido threatening to shove a pillow in Aldrich's smug face ended with him tangled in silken sheets, breathless, muttering insults that sounded suspiciously like endearments. Aldrich, of course, was insufferably pleased. "You're mine," the king murmured against his ear, his voice low and dangerous in the way that made Kaido's skin prickle. "Always." Yeah, whatever," Kaido mumbled, pretending he didn't just cling tighter. Life after marriage was loud. From the moment the sun rose until it dipped below the horizon, the palace echoed with their banter. Council meetings became less of a formal affair and more of a spectacle. Aldrich sitting smugly while Kaido rolled his eyes and vetoed half his brilliant ideas. The people adored it, whispering that their Luna was the only one who could tame the fearsome king. In truth, Aldrich wasn't tamed at all. He simply redirected his ferocity into one thing: loving his husband. It was an all-consuming kind of love. Aldrich rarely left Kaido's side. If Kaido wanted tea, it was poured for him before he could reach the pot. If he tried to lift a pen, Aldrich took it from him like it was a weapon he couldn't be trusted with. He even commissioned a personal garden filled with shady trees and soft cushions, perfect for napping, only to station guards at every exit so Kaido couldn't sneak out of the palace. Their mating life was frequent. So frequent, in fact, that Zephyr once muttered something about dragon stamina, and promptly received a sandal to the head from Kaido. Months passed. The kingdom flourished under their joint rule. And then, one morning, Kaido found himself staring blankly at a healer who had just cheerfully informed him he was pregnant. "What?" "It's perfectly normal for males in Dravenheart," the healer explained. "Congratulations, Your Grace." Kaido blinked. "You mean to tell me I've been here over a year, married to a fire-breathing lizard, and now you're mentioning this?" Aldrich's reaction was dramatic. He swept Kaido into his arms, declared a week-long festival, and banned him from lifting so much as a spoon. "Put me down, I can walk," Kaido protested. "You're carrying our child," Aldrich growled, eyes fierce with possessive pride. "You will do nothing strenuous, ever again." "I sneezed this morning," Kaido deadpanned. "Do you want to ban that too?" "If it's dangerous for you, yes," Aldrich replied, without hesitation. The kingdom erupted with joy at the news. Villagers lined the streets to offer blessings, merchants gave free goods, and children left flower garlands at the palace gates. The Luna, their savior, was bringing an heir into the world. It was during one of these festival days that Kaido spotted Zephyr leaning against a balcony, smirking knowingly. "What?" Kaido asked suspiciously. Zephyr chuckled. "Just thinking about how different things might have been if the teleportation slab hadn't been stored away." Kaido froze. "Stored away?" "Yes, the teleportation slab was stored in a faraway vault, and it was never broken in the first place. And to say this to you, we are sorry for lying to you, but would you have stayed with us if you knew the truth?" Zephyr asked half casually, half seriously. Kaido thought about it. "Oh, probably not." He expected to feel anger, betrayal, something. But instead, there was only a strange warmth in his chest. Even if he had the chance to leave now, He wouldn't not because he was an emperor's consort or the people's beloved Luna, but because of one clingy, ridiculous dragon who loved him like no one ever had. Of course, he wasn't going to say that out loud. Unfortunately for him, Aldrich had been listening. In 2 strides, the king pulled him into a kiss that stole his breath. "Then I'm glad we lied," he whispered against his lips. "Creepy, manipulative lizard," Kaido muttered. "You're creepy, manipulative lizard," Aldrich replied with a grin. Weeks later, Kaido was napping in his garden. Aldrich, in his miniature dragon form, was curled protectively around him like a warm-scaled blanket, tail twitching every time someone passed too close. And then, one bright spring morning, their son was born. They named him Kalen, a spirited little boy with Kaido's sharp eyes and Aldrich's golden hair. The kingdom celebrated for days on end, fireworks lighting the skies, feasts spilling into the streets. Despite the chaos, Kaito sat in their private chambers, cradling Kalen while Aldrich hovered like a lovesick shadow. "You're staring again," Kaito said without looking up. "Because my mate and my son are the most precious treasures in this world," Aldrich murmured, brushing a kiss over Kaido's temple. Kaido rolled his eyes, but his lips curved ever so slightly. "Idiot dragon." Aldrich only smiled. "Forever yours." And in the heart of Dravenheart, where peace reigned and love burned brighter than any flame, they lived loudly, chaotically, and happily ever after.